You sit in the car after you've already parked. The engine is off. Your hand stays on the steering wheel longer than it needs to. You check your phone. Not because there's something to read. Just to avoid opening the door. Inside the house, the lights are on. Dinner still needs to happen. Tomorrow still needs to be planned. You tell yourself you're tired, that this is normal, that everyone needs a minute before going inside. But you're not resting. You're delaying. Because once you step out of the car, you have to be useful again. The parent who keeps things running. The partner who doesn't complicate things. The adult who chose stability and learned how to live inside it. You stay seated because the car is the last place where no one needs anything from you. No one warned you this would be the part that empties you first. Later, you're standing in the kitchen. The house is quieter now. Not peaceful. Just quieter. You rinse the same cup twice. You scroll messages you've already seen. You answer questions before they're finished being asked. Nothing is wrong. That's the problem. This part of your life is supposed to feel like relief. You stayed. You did the responsible thing. You kept the structure intact. So why does your chest feel flat instead of full? You're not unhappy in a loud way. You're not falling apart. You're functioning. You laugh at the right moments. You show up when you're needed. You move the day forward. But somewhere between bedtime and tomorrow's schedule, you notice something missing. It's not excitement. You stopped expecting that. It's not love. You still care. It's the absence of resistance, the absence of desire to push back, the quiet acceptance of a life that no longer asks who you are. You tell yourself this is what maturity feels like. Less drama, less wanting. But what it actually feels like is being present without being involved. You're here, everything is running. And somehow, you're not. It didn't start like this. There was no single moment where you decided to disappear. No night where everything broke. It began with small adjustments. Temporary ones. You stayed a little quieter. You argued less. You chose the option that caused the least disruption. At first, it felt mature, responsible, like something an adult does. Then the roles settled in. You became the one who holds the routine, the one who remembers appointments, the one who smooths things over before they turn sharp. You learned which parts of yourself created tension, and you learned how to put them away. Not forever, just until things were easier, just until the kids were older, just until there was more time. Responsibility slowly replaced choice. You stopped asking what you wanted. Not because you didn't care, but because wanting felt inefficient. Desire became a liability, something that complicated the system you were keeping alive. You didn't stay because you were weak. You stayed because you were capable. Because someone had to be steady. Because someone had to absorb the weight. And over time, survival took the place of preference. Maintenance replaced movement. By the time you noticed what it cost, this version of you was already doing its job too well. What's happening isn't dramatic. That's why it lasts. You didn't shut down. You split. One part of you stayed visible, the part that functions, the part that keeps things calm. Another part stepped back. Quietly, without protest. You still speak, you still decide. But something inside you stopped volunteering. You learned how to be present without being exposed, how to participate without risking friction, how to stay without fully arriving. Some people call this maturity. Others call it commitment. Esther Perel once described relationships that survive by becoming efficient. Not cruel, not broken, just organized. In plain language, it means this: the relationship works. You adapt so well that nothing pushes against you anymore. No edge, no pull. And because nothing is wrong, nothing gets named. So the system stays intact. The days keep moving. And the part of you that used to reach forward learns how to wait without expecting anything back. This is the mechanism. Not repression, not collapse. Accommodation that went on too long without anyone noticing what it asked you to give up. This is where the tension settles in. You stayed to protect the children, to give them stability, to make sure nothing shattered in front of them. And it worked. The house stayed standing. The routines held. No one had to pack bags in a rush. But something else happened at the same time. The version of you that stayed became thinner. Not absent, just reduced. You learned how to be steady without being alive, how to be consistent without being seen. The paradox is quiet. That's why it survives. The same stability that kept the family intact slowly taught you how to disappear inside it. You didn't vanish all at once. You faded in useful ways. The less you needed, the easier everything became. The easier everything became, the less space there was for you. You tell yourself this is the cost of staying, that this is what good parents do. But late at night, or alone in the car, you feel the weight of it. Not regret, not anger. Just the strange realization that staying was never neutral. It asked for something in return, and no one told you it would be you. People talk about this stage in simple terms. That's where the shame comes from. They say staying is noble, that it proves strength, that it means you put your children first. But what they don't say is how much silence that praise requires from you. Because staying isn't a badge. It's a condition. You didn't wake up wanting to be admired. You woke up wanting things not to fall apart. Another story people repeat is that the children don't notice. That as long as there's no yelling, no doors slammed, no visible damage, everything is fine. But children don't need explanations to sense absence. They feel tone. They feel pressure. They feel when a room is emotionally managed instead of lived in. They learn early what it looks like to be useful, what it costs to be easy. There's also the belief that this is just a phase, that if you endure long enough, something will naturally return. But time doesn't undo adaptation. It deepens it. The longer you live this way, the more normal it feels to not ask yourself questions. The more unfamiliar your own resistance becomes. None of this means you chose wrong. It means the story around staying was incomplete. It talked about sacrifice. It didn't talk about erosion. Nothing changes on the outside. And that's important to notice. The house still runs the way it always has. The children still grow, still need things, still move the days forward. Life keeps stacking itself neatly, one obligation on top of another. What shifts doesn't announce itself. It happens in the way you stop arguing with yourself about whether you're allowed to feel this way. In the way you no longer rehearse the reason staying was necessary. Or try to convince yourself that it should feel better than it does. Not because you've reached a conclusion, not because you've chosen anything new, but because you begin to notice something quietly uncomfortable. You've been relating to yourself like a resource. Something to manage carefully. Something to ration so nothing else collapses. Something that exists primarily to keep the system running smoothly. For a long time, that made sense. It kept things stable. It kept things intact. This shift isn't about leaving, and it isn't about fixing what feels off. It's about recognizing that you exist beyond what you provide, beyond how useful you are, beyond how little disruption you cause. You start to feel the difference between being necessary and being present, between being relied on and being felt. When the discomfort shows up, you don't rush to correct it or turn it into a decision. You let it stay unresolved, unnamed, without immediately translating it into action. Not as a threat, as evidence. Evidence that the part of you that went quiet didn't disappear. It simply learned how to stop interrupting a life that no longer asked it to speak. You end up back in the same place you started, in the car, after everything that needed to be done is done. The engine is off again. The house is quiet again. Nothing looks different from the outside. You don't feel clearer. You don't feel resolved. That was never the point. You're still staying, still showing up, still holding the shape of the life you built. But the pause feels different now. Not lighter, just more honest. You notice how familiar this space has become. This moment where no one is asking anything from you, where you don't have to perform usefulness or calm or gratitude. You don't turn this into a question yet. You don't ask what it means or where it leads. You just sit there a little more awake to yourself than before, aware that something in you has been paying attention this whole time. The door is still closed, the house is still waiting, and you're still here, not fixed, not finished, just no longer completely gone from your own life.